What's up, guys? It's your boy James, aka 68J, coming to you on this amazing day. I've got an incredible guest, guys. Brad KIMES from Digital Perspectives, somebody that I've looked up to. This guy is one of the biggest voices in crypto and the XRP community. And by the way, he's also in charge of the upcoming event that I'm really excited about, May 3rd and 4th. Brad, welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, James, with an intro like that, first of all, thank you. And I'd love to meet this Brad KIMES guy. He sounds like something else. You know, it doesn't sound like the guy that my wife yells at daily. I don't know what's going on here, James.
You know, so funny, brother. We were just talking before coming on the show, and I want to save it for online, but I remember going with my wife, and I've been on some of the biggest stages around the world. And I was at that XRP Las Vegas, and I just looked around. And it was like some of the most brilliant minds around the world. And I remember as the convention was going on, and I looked up on stage and I saw you, I saw DAI, and I just thought to myself, I looked over at my wife, I said, one of these days, I said, I'm going to know those guys and they're going to know who I am. And here we are right before the next event, and we're friends and we're brothers. And I'm so blessed and fortunate and honored to have you on the show.
James, let me tell you something. I feel the same exact way. It means a lot to me. When I started seeing you come onto the scene with the interviews you were doing, I said, this guy's energy is just like my own, or DAI. I said, this is a brother from another mother right here. Sir. I could tell that energy was there because, first of all, the format of your show is elevating other people. And I started out doing that same exact thing. So I love that we've made that connection. And like you, I have the power of very, very powerful dreams, my friend, and so do you. So
that's right, yeah. And I remember it's funny because when you initially reached out and we got on a Zoom and you were just sitting back on your couch with your hand over your head, just talking to me like we've known each other for. I said, this dude is a real one, and it just really made me instantly say, you know, I like this guy a lot. This is my new friend, and it was just an instant connection. Your demeanor, how you carry yourself. But I want to talk about Brad KIMES, the man, because it's funny. I'd asked you for a picture, and then even without even hearing your story, I Googled your name. And when I Googled your name, these pictures came out. I said, oh my God, this guy's had a hell of a journey. Like, I mean, from being in shape, from just all the, and I mean, just the internet told a story. And I said, I am so impressed with who you are and just your journey of where you come. Can you tell everybody, without even, you know, getting into crypto yet, who is Brad KIMES, where you came from? Because you've had one heck of a ride, man.
Well, James, thank you very much. And you have a great story too, because as with going on anybody's show, I went back and started digging in. Who is James McFadden? I want to know who I'm talking to. And man, we really have a parallel story, you know, where yours is basketball, mine's music. And that's exactly what happened to me. So, you know, as a young kid, and I have a dear friend of mine who always tells this story to everybody he's ever met. He says, you know, when I was a little kid in school, there was one kid that always told me he was going to grow up and play music for a living, and it was Brad KIMES, and he did it. And I don't know anybody else in school that did what they said they were going to do as a kid, you know?
Right.
And I feel very fortunate for that and very accomplished, because I did set out to do that and I did accomplish it. Now, that journey, obviously, as it does with anybody that's going for something like that in their life, you're going to do a lot of the barroom gigs and the weddings and the corporate gigs and all of that stuff. But then you start having those successes of where you wanted to be, you know, studio work, working with a #1 charted artist or multi-platinum producers and things of that nature. And, you know, I got to do all of that stuff and I felt very accomplished. But then the pandemic happened, James. Now, I had this little YouTube channel on the side, and I was just doing it to stay involved, because here's the other thing too, because music was my passion in my life, that I knew I wanted to do that, and I was doing it and made a career out of it. But I was never happy with the money that you make as a musician. I always wanted more. So for 15 years of my life, a long time ago, I owned rental properties while being a professional musician.
Wow.
So, and those rental properties paid for the $500,000 home that we lived in at the time, you know, and all of that stuff. So, you know, and then we were going to scale, and then, you know, the market went bad in 08, 09. I lost and got wiped out in 08, 09, man. And I'll tell you something, you know, and I know that this story is not unfamiliar to a lot of people. I know DAI and his family experienced a loss in 08, 09 as well. And I don't know if that moment hit you or not, but it was very powerful to get wiped out like that.
Yeah.
And then it's not a lesson you have to learn twice, right?
Mm-mm.
It's like, and I didn't even know I was going to learn it the first time, because the truth is I really wasn't completely awake. And I mean, I don't think to some level you ever are completely awake to everything, but I know that I didn't possess the awareness that I have today. And touching that hot stove and getting burnt in 08, 09 and losing everything that I had built at the time really was quite devastating. So, that journey to come back from that, from 08, is how I started investing again. I found the sector, and I don't want to say the word because sometimes you two get a little funny, but there's an industry that is not legal on the federal level, but there was an administration with the Obama administration that was lax on that particular industry.
Right.
I invested in that industry with my oldest brother at the time. And Willie Nelson and Snoop Dogg had invested in a certain company in that industry. And I was in a bunch of little companies, kind of playing and betting on everything, like the penny stock market, or almost like the way you would vision meme coins today in crypto,
Right.
And I laid money. But when I heard that one company had Willie Nelson and Snoop Dogg behind it, I said, first of all, these guys are businessmen as much as they're artists, right?
That's right.
I got deep and I got in there. 8 months later, that company became the first company of its kind to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
Wow.
And then everything, like, I think we 7 or 10x the investment. Now, it wasn't enough to change our whole life, but it was enough to impact our life to realize this is where we need to be. And we need to be in this area of investing in a very big way. Like most people, I started hearing about Bitcoin. This is 2016, 2017. I started doing the work. And then quickly you find, Ripple, XRP, the Federal Reserve Faster Payment Task Force. And from there, I'm obsessed. And it's over.
Wow.
And then I'm in after that,
So like everyone else, the shiny thing got your attention, which was Bitcoin. And then doing your due diligence. Now, you said you got in around 16, 17?
I got in and I bought in 17. I started looking at the space, through the end of 16 into 17. And here's the part that, you talk about never forgetting things.
Right.
I was looking at XRP when it was still 0.006 of a penny.
No way. Are you serious?
But I never bought until it got into the 28-cent range, 28-cent range, because I was still figuring it out. Like I had saw it, but I didn't know anything about it. I was still doing the work on Bitcoin and looking at that, and then Ethereum, blah, 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 And as you come down, then you get into that. When I got into it, it was like 20 some cents, 22, 25 cents or something.
Right.
And then I started getting into it. Now, then I still to this day, James, think to myself, I'm like, God, I missed that window of 0.006 of a penny by about 4 to 6 months, while I was doing my due diligence,
But the truth is, there's so many people who thought that way about Bitcoin. And I guess it's really irrelevant. Like if you saw Bitcoin, let's say 3,500, which is when I first was interacting with it and buying it. When you look at 100 grand, it's like, it doesn't really matter if I got it cheaper than that or not. And I think for XRP, for what it was really, truly created for, I think that 20 cents, a lot of people think you're the luckiest guy in the world to even be in around that area. So you kind of went into, I guess, the initial question was what attracted you to XRP? And I guess you kind of just, no one said it. You just kind of start researching and you found it on your own. Yeah,
because everybody was talking in these investment groups that I was in on social media platforms. What's a Bitcoin? What's a Bitcoin? And hey, have you checked out Bitcoin? I just bought some Bitcoin. And then I'll tell you how early it was for me. Like when you first get into the space, and I was like, can anybody tell me what the Bitcoin is? You know what I mean? Like
the Bitcoin.
The Bitcoin. Like I couldn't have sounded any more square, but I did the work. I went down into the space and you start figuring it like, okay, these, one of the things that I found confusing was the term cryptocurrency itself.
Okay.
Most of this stuff isn't money. It's about payment networks.
Right.
Once I did that, and then honestly, and nobody says it better than Brian Brooks, the former OCC of the United States. And he said it, the nomenclature cryptocurrency is what's caused a lot of problems in itself. And he's absolutely right about that.
Yeah.
The moment you understand these things to be new value protocols that can move value across these networks, things become much clearer immediately.
Yeah. When you say that word, it's almost like saying MLM to somebody, or like people, oh, what'd you say? And so it's like the cryptocurrency. But when you say digital assets, it doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah. I think at some point too, to your point, James, I think at some point the crypto name starts to fade, and it'll be this, it'll almost be like disco.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's disco still around, but ain't nobody really doing it anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it had its time. It had its day.
Right.
And I think cryptocurrency is this much of the market.
Right.
The rest of the pie is the traditional markets.
Right.
And we're about to see all of that be tokenized. BlackRock,
I agree.
Beautiful example, right?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I want to get into this next conversation, but I want to lead up into it. One of the things that really impressed me with you, you can really never know someone completely unless you spent some time with them, or interacted with them. And the first thing that I got from you is you weren't some guy with a silver spoon in your mouth. Your parents, gave you a Rolex at 16. You seem like one of those guys like myself that you came from, hard knocks. You came from, the struggle. You came from wanting to make a better life. And I think that's why I was very connected with you and DAI. One person that really also that I relate to, welfare, the project, same story as me, is John Deaton. I want to talk about John Deaton and what he means, to you. I know you spent some time with him. I know he was at, last year's event. What does him running for Senate mean for us in crypto? Not, obviously XRP, and he's represented, but not just XRP. He goes where the problem's at. That's what I love about John. He goes, if there's a problem with Coinbase, a problem with Library, if Brad KIMES has a problem, it just seems like he always shows up. What does John Deaton mean to you and his run for Senate?
It means the world to me. I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. I have an enormous amount of respect for John Deaton, and I feel very privileged and honored to know that I can call him a friend. Yeah. Right. And I also feel very privileged and honored that I'm a special investigator for John Deaton.
Oh, wow.
And his legal team. So, nice. And have been since ETHGate. Right. Wow. So there's a very special relationship there with John. And you're absolutely right, James. It's not hard to see a leader, right? Because they don't need anybody to call on them. They just start leading.
That's right.
And that's John Deaton. John Deaton is a born leader.
Yeah.
And John Deaton understands struggle. And you're absolutely right. Like John Deaton and like yourself, I came from a poor background. We were poor. Now, there was a lot of work done in our home to not feel poor.
Right.
Right. And not to act in a generational poverty sense.
That's right.
Right. But you were aware every second of every day of your limited means. I was aware when I was a child how tight things were when my mother and I were living alone, and there was a Christmas coming up, and I knew that we didn't have a lot of money. And my mother, God rest her soul, none of my parents are with me anymore except in spirit, right?
Neither of mine, yeah.
Yeah. But I've never shared the story, but I'm going to share it with you because I know somebody out here will be able to appreciate it, right?
Yes, sir.
But I know that when I was a teenager, things were very tight, and my mother and I were on our own. And I heard her talking on the phone one day in her room as I was going to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And I heard her just very lowly say, "I just don't have the money for Christmas."
Oh, wow.
And I heard that and kept right on going to the bathroom. And then the next day, I didn't want to say it right away. I didn't want to think that I'd heard anything.
Right.
And the next day I told her, I said, "I want to let you know right now, I know Christmas is coming, but I'm excited that we're here, we're doing what we're doing, and I'm happy. And I just want to let you know, Christmas ain't about presents. So I don't need a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean?"
Right.
And then I got one gift that year. One gift. And I didn't care. It was an electronic chess game set is what it was.
Right.
This is going back to the 80s, right?
Right.
Electronic was a big deal.
That's right.
And I'm going to tell you something. I never played with that game a lot on my own, but I made sure every day for about a month that when my mother came home from work, I was sitting out in the living room playing that game when she came home.
Wow, that's awesome.
because I didn't want her to think that I wasn't feeling fulfilled,
That's
or
right.
that for some reason that I felt less because of the life that I had.
That's right.
That's true story, right?
That's
So
awesome.
when you asked who Brad Kimes was, that's who I'm interested in.
Yeah. Man, you took me so far back there. I almost, you start thinking about the times with your parents. It gets you kind of emotional thinking about those things. And, we would pull up to the Salvation Army and get out and get whatever it was for free. And so, yeah, it's just crazy times. But, they always say adversity makes or breaks you. And I think for us, it definitely defines, who we are and our journey and what motivated us for a better tomorrow. So, man, I appreciate that about you in a major way.
Well, James, let me throw this at you too, while we're here, right? When I got into music, it was all I ever wanted to do. And it was so important to me. Now, you got to understand, I'm going back to when I was a young man. I started playing gigs, when I was still in school.
What I mean? What was your instrument?
Drums.
Drums. Oh, wow.
So I play a lot of different instruments, but I get paid to play drums, right?
Wow.
At
a high level.
At a high level, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I've worked very hard at that. In fact, in June I have a drum master class that I'm doing for a music school, which I'm super excited about because I love sharing knowledge with the younger kids that are coming up. It's their time. It's their turn. And I love that. I've been an instructor and a teacher for over 25 years too. Wow. So I've got a long list of kids that have gone to Berkeley and then going on to play with lots of people. I had one of my students go on and played on The Voice, you know what I mean? And,
wow.
It's like, so I've there's a lot of lineage on that side of the camp from my life there,
Right.
But I don't focus on that for the channel. But one thing I'll say is that what I learned as a young adult, I was so, I became very ego-driven about being a musician. I was never a limousine party guy.
Right.
I worked for a lot of those guys.
Right.
But I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that never wanted the limelight. The only one I wanted to know me was the producer, the music director, right? Or the artists themselves, because they're the ones that cut the check. That's Everybody else I didn't give a damn about.
Right.
You know what I mean? As long as they were cool and they could play, they'll call me if they get on another gig. They'll call me because they know I'll do a good job,
Right.
But I'll say this. I was so caught up in doing me in that world in the early part of my career, not towards the end, because you end up settling down, right? You end up settling down if you're doing it right,
Right.
But in my early part of my career, James, I was so consumed with being a musician and that I was doing this for money.
Right. Right.
Like, I'm not just anybody, James. I'm a musician.
That's a big deal.
I'm a professional musician.
Right.
But then I had to go do the work,
right?
The mental work, because I spent too many years being concerned with somebody realizing that I was a professional musician or a professional drummer first, before being a parent, before being a friend, before being a husband, right? All of that shit.
Yeah.
But then I had to go do that work.
That's right.
And I saw enough other people lose from that position of life.
That's right.
And that mindset that I didn't have to touch the stove myself to find out it was hot. I said, I'm going to check my shit right here.
That's right.
And this is over right now because you know what? I'm nothing more than a human. And Herbie Hancock taught me that. And not directly. I don't know him, so I'm not trying to allude that I do. But he has some beautiful lectures that he's given about the work he did himself in that area. And I had to dissolve the ego and detach from that and learn that I'm a human. And you know what happened when I did that work, James? I found out that I could be a better parent. I found out I could be a better husband.
That's right.
I found out I could be a better friend. I found out that it wasn't about me. It was about how many people I could serve, James.
That's right.
That's the difference. And when I took that shift, that pivot, now it's not about me. It's about what can I do as a conduit to serve others. And from that moment in my life, I've been operating in the service of others. And that's how we get the channel. That's how we get the XRP Las Vegas conference. And I'm constantly wondering, how can I continue to scale my service to others?
Well, so crazy. There's a few questions within what you just said. Number one is, or a few thoughts. That's why we vibe, is because you were telling my story right now. I mean, you're telling your story, but I always talk about to those who follow the Crypto for Life movement that being on some of the biggest stages around the world, you were always chasing success, chasing money, chasing that recognition, and also looking back going, I can't go back there. And at some point you start realizing your purpose, and you start realizing by seeing other people do certain things. You're like, I was on stage with some of these guys, and these guys were way older than I was, Brad, and I'm looking up and and I would ask them, these older big time speakers, like on Tony Robbins level, and and I was like, so how's your relationship with your wife? I see her, from time. How's your relationship with your kids? Don't really got one. And I was like, is this where I'm headed? And at the same time, I was missing events and prom queen and anniversaries. And I said, enough is enough. And that's to me where I made that turning point. And so for me, crypto was something that I could do at home. I told my wife, I said, give me one more chance at this, because, and I didn't mean in the sense that there was an issue, but she supported all that travel and all that moving around. And then I said, look, this is it. When I saw Crash, I said, this is it. And if I'm right, this is going to change everything. And so I definitely appreciate that story. Now, something else that you said that was quite remarkable. Well, here's the thing. What genre of music you were in? Because I was thinking about that too when you're different genres. Were you just playing different types?
I had to play all kinds of genres. So I'm versed in R&B, pop, rock, blues, funk, light jazz.
Okay.
Right? You have to do it all. Like,
yeah.
What ended up happening for me is I started out like a lot of other people do, high school bandmates. You're going to be in a band together,
right.
And then somebody in it doesn't take it serious and then messes it up. They don't realize it's a business. Right. And they treat it like it's not a business, and then it costs everybody. And then I realized when that turned sour and that went upside down, that I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to empower myself musically enough to where I can be much of a commodity to as many people in my area and region as I can.
Right.
So the more I started versing myself in different genres of music, the more work opened up to me. And the important thing is that I showed up to everybody's gig. Yeah. And I didn't play the gig like it was a rock guy on an R&B gig. I didn't play the gig like I was a blues guy on a rock gig. You have to stylistically kind of be a chameleon, and you have to show up. And when you're a musician for hire, you might get the call today. I got a call. This is just an example. I got a call from a dear friend of mine who was also a student, and he was supposed to do a gig with Marianne Wilson from the Supremes. And he calls me, and it's 10 o'clock at night. And he says, Brad, I got all the charts right here, but I can't do the gig.
Right.
I was like, what are you talking about? Of course you can do the gig. It's tomorrow, Right. And he said, my nerves, I'm not feeling it. We went through 20 minutes trying to talk him down. And he said, I'm telling you, you got to do this gig. I said, okay, bring me the stuff. He brings me the folder of music. It's this thick. The gig is in 12 hours.
Wow.
And in 8 hours, I've got a rehearsal that's going to have no singer at the rehearsal. They call dry rehearsal. So you run through the entire show with no singer, right? The intention of doing this is to find out who can read music or not, because you can't follow the lyrics because no one's singing on stage.
Right.
Then the music director's putting you on a bus if you ain't got your shit together, right? So So I went, we got through it, we did it, it worked out. But, it's funny because not everything's that hyper intense, because you build relationships with people. But I built the reputation that I could come in and play your gig with no issues on or off the bandstand. And I'm going to make you feel so good and so comfortable while you're playing your own gig that you're going to want me back. Right.
Yeah.
So that's how you build your brand.
Yeah. The reason I was asking, you got a certain soulfulness to your voice and to your demeanor, and that just shows that you're really embedded. I can see when you start talking about like blues and jazz and all that, I hear that and I see that. You can tell when people have been around that music and that type of genre, and it definitely pours out in your personality while you're so cool and collective and just outgoing. And probably you're like me in many ways. I could see you being one of those guys you could drop him in the jungle, he'll just walk, come out, dancing with all the animals.
I will. I'm gonna make friends while I'm there. Ain't no doubt, man. Seriously. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I can see that in you. I can see that in you in a big way. The next question I want to get into is Ripple. Obviously, you strike me as a guy who does his research, does his due diligence. You don't take any shortcuts. You've researched this company. In your opinion, is Ripple a solid company?
Oh my gosh, yes. 1,000,000%. And now it's important for people to understand I am a shareholder, right? So full disclosure,
Right.
that's how much I really do believe in it.
Okay.
But it's something interesting, when you come down to that, because there is a standard practice of reviewing a company, right? Looking at the pitch deck, looking at the proofs and the partnerships, who's on the board. A bunch of people from the U.S. Treasury have come through that camp at Ripple, whether they're a Ripple advisor or a board member like Rosie Rios, the 43rd treasurer. When I look at those things, even when you evaluate the company in that regard, look at the news in the last 24 hours about the Ripple stablecoin. It's no surprise to me. There's so many people from the U.S. Treasury going into Ripple and going through Ripple and on the board there. It's perfectly making sense to me, because I would not be surprised if the United States adopts the XRP Ledger Value Protocol as a trusted value protocol to move value and settle payments.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, it's funny to me how, and I'm gonna ask you this question, with all these people who seem brilliant, and there's a big difference between, and again, this is not taking any shots, but you got a lot of these maxis, and I'm not an XRP maxi, I'm an XRP big holder, but I'm not a maxi. I'm diversified, but I'm very, very passionate about the project for many reasons. You tend to look around and say, why aren't more people getting this, Brad? Like, what are they not seeing that we see? And I just learned in life, look, I didn't invent anything. When I started my car lots of cell phone stores or got into the music business or, movies, whatever it was, or owned a professional team, I didn't invent any of that. I just followed what other successful people did. And one of the things I love about this movement that I'm doing right now with these interviews is all people have to really do is pay attention. When I'm bringing on people like yourself and all these other amazing people, I'm really trying to make a point. And that point is, look how brilliant these people are. And they all have one common denominator in common. Yeah, they did their research on Ripple and XRP. And so if you see all these brilliant people moving in the same way, it's not that hard. It's not financial advice, but you know what? I'm going to move with them. And so that's really what I'm trying to get at as I'm bringing all these brilliant minds on my show. I'm trying to give validation, because there's nothing better than seeing professional, smart individuals like yourself that are moving. You're not buying Chicago coin. You're not buying, and there's not a coin like that. I just made it up because I don't want to say anybody's project that they may love, but you're not jumping into all these different things. You're focused, and yeah, you might be diversified, but you're focused. And so, when we saw Bitcoin drop from 68,000 to 15, 16,000, whatever it was, you saw Ripple, unlike a lot of companies that were running, firing CEOs, doing a lot of layoffs, leaving the country, banks going out of business. Ripple kept expanding. They kept acquiring other companies, kept hiring some of the most brilliant people around the world. What does that say, Brad, about the company, and why don't most people see that?
It's so funny that you put this question this way, because it's so accurate. Right. The observation is so accurate. People miss it. And to go back to what you said, I'm not a maxi either. And if I am a maxi, I'm a utility maxi, right? If your token, a project or company has utility, I'm probably interested in investing, right? So, but yeah, I don't chase meme coins and green candles. And I hope anybody who does makes a gazillion dollars. I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. It's just not in me, right? And I have the old tried and true macro long-term investor. That's what works for me. But, I think the reason a lot of people miss Ripple and XRP is really kind of twofold. One, for the people who are in this space, the maxis are maxis and they can't see it, like a Clydesdale. They got blinders on. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people that got the blinders on is because they already made money from Bitcoin and Ethereum or some other coin, and they don't want to see anything because they already feel they're so right.
That's right.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
You get some money in your pocket.
Can't tell you nothing.
They can't tell you shit.
That's right.
Because that's how smart you are. What's the measure to my brilliance? Look how much money I just made on that. You can't tell me nothing. You're dumber than me because I just made more money than you did. And did you invest in that? Because I did. No, I'm smarter than you. That afraid is bad math.
That's right.
That is bad math, right? So, but that's the ego thing. That's the ego thing people get tied into. And I think for the ones that miss it that are not in this space, they miss it because there's so much suppression in the market. And by suppression, I'm talking specifically about the SEC suing a company like Ripple.
That's right.
And if you have history in understanding how the SEC operates, you'll remember the SEC sued Microsoft, the SEC sued Tesla, the SEC sued Amazon. And in fact, if we're looking at that, they're great companies. And if we're looking at that, you could make the argument that the SEC is a great barometer for what to invest in.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, I think, is that the case and the stigma of the case that's been on Ripple, I think throws a lot of shade towards people, and they're like, I don't want to fool with that because it's in the case. But a lot of people in general have poor investment disciplines.
That's right.
Most of them won't start investing until the price goes up.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
Right.
Because how many times have you gone to the store and said, oh, hey, look, my favorite shoes are on sale, 50% off. That's okay. I'll come back and get 2 pair when it's full price. But that's what most people do in investing, right? They're like, well, I'm not buying it right now, but if it goes up, I'll get some. It's like, that sounds smart. You know what I mean? You know,
or they look at, or they put cryptocurrency. They don't even put it in a same sentence as like investments, like with stocks. They put it with like lottery tickets and scratchers, or going to the casino and pulling the lever. Like, but they're looking for that quick deal, and they don't. And I would always say that I think it's because people aren't really business savvy to do that type of research. They're just looking for that quick thing, that quick, that 100-yard dash instead of the marathon. That's what they're looking for.
You know what else is funny too? Because we all got the friends and family, and extended family kind of vibe, and when I see you doing your thing, player, I went and got me some XRP. Like, all right, you high fiving and shit. 3 months later, I got they're blowing. My phone is levitating, and I look at it and like, how come the price went down? And I'm like, let me call this. I get on the phone like, how much XRP you got? They're like, I got 1,500. I'm like, if you don't go sit your ass down. Call me, you got 1,500 XRP.
Exactly.
You want to know why the price didn't go up? You don't go sit down right now.
Yeah, sit your. But it's the truth though, and it's almost like it's you hit it on the head when in 2021. I probably had friends that came out of the woodwork. I had celebrities coming down to me and my wife's house because I was in that circle, and they would fly in and we would go see John Legend, do all these things, and we come back and they'd be at the house just like salivating for information. Boy, when that thing retraced, I didn't get a call that whole time, Brad. I mean, my phone went silent. They're like, almost like I told you so. But it's funny when you go back to, you said something about Amazon and them, the SEC suing. I think if anybody ever had a chance to look at Elon Musk, that emotional video he did on X, maybe even before it was X, it was Twitter. And he said, he was explaining how the SEC went after him. And he said, I knew they were wrong. He goes, I knew we didn't do anything wrong. He goes, but I had to settle. He goes, because I wanted to save my baby. And I was like, what? No, he didn't do it because he was wrong. He did it because he wanted to save his company. And then they exploded. And it kind of goes back to Amazon and everything else. It's like, and then I don't know if I actually showed you this. I want to show you this before and get your opinion on it real quick. Yeah. And then we'll continue that conversation. It was our good buddy DAI showed a clip of Molly Elmore, and I want you to take a look at this. And after you listen to this, kind of let's go back to having to pay to play. This is Molly DAI. Actually, this is our interview, but he showed it on his channel. Here we go.
Bring it on, because I think Molly could be very right here.
All right, a couple of things. One,
I think Molly might be directly over the target. I've been watching Masters of the Air on Apple, which you should watch. It's World War II about the U.S. bombing raids and stuff during World War II. Molly is directly over the target, and she's opening the bomb bay doors.
All right, a couple of things. One, Gary Gensler has done us a service by having those MIT courses publicly available. Yeah. And in one of those courses, he said that if you want to move in to the banking world, the legacy banking system, the monopoly, you got to pay up like in the mob. You've got to, pay the mob don of the other family if you want to enter into a new market. And so this is what the fine looks like to me, is they've conceded that XRP is going to be used, and they're like, we want our kickback, like in an organized crime. Now, this will be the interesting thing that people haven't really discussed. Like, all right, so I don't think Ripple's going to have to pay $2 billion because they have very good lawyers that will hopefully negotiate.
Look, I think that
so that's the part right there. It's just the fact that she's saying it's a pay-to-play game in the United States. If you want to, we know who you are. And I always said, Brad, there's four sets of people that know about XRP, the utility, and what it was created for. Ripple themselves, the retail investor, you and I, the institutions that are either involved or behind the scenes waiting, and the good old SEC and the government. They know exactly what it was created for. So, hey, it's pay to play. Would you agree with that statement from Molly?
I absolutely agree with that statement. Molly is a brilliant mind and a rising star in this space, as far as I'm concerned. I used to do a weekly show, and she used to work with us on our private group. She's fantastic, super brilliant, and I even adopted her terminology because I think it's so spot on. The way I see governments is like cartels and gangs and public and political parties. They're all cartels and gangs and subsets. And that's exactly what's going on here. And, you know, I certainly personally believe that the SEC is working under regulatory capture for the banks. And this is a weaponization of private sector and government interest. Right. And I think that's what we're watching play out here. And I think, thank goodness, that Ripple has the coffers that they have to be able to fight this fight, because not only are they fighting it for themselves in the clarity, but the precedent that they're setting by getting this case done is going to speak for the entire digital asset space. And thank goodness for it, because I think that they're going to make sure that a lot of this space is where it needs to be through the final report.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. The fact that they were able to, you know, step up and it's, you know, for anyone who's looking at it, you almost have to look at the fact of how resilient they are in this process, and the fact that they haven't wavered. And, you know, you would think that people look at that, look at the fact that they've been victorious, look at the fact that, hey, it's not, and I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated, Brad. They're looking for that quick movement. This coin has done that and that coin. But if you just look at, it's like the turtle and the hare. Just look at their victories. You know, Ripple's not a security, July 13th, 2023. Everything just, the him and emails, all these things just keep happening, victory after victory. And now all of a sudden you look up and there's a stable coin and people are like, oh, no, it's just, they just don't want to give this company any credit for anything that they have in place. It's just unbelievable. But yet they keep winning. You
know, what's funny that you bring that point up, because it's so valid. Even this morning, CoinDesk, with the FUD that they came out with, CoinDesk should be ashamed of herself. I literally put a tweet out and tagged CoinDesk and said, hey, this is ZipRecruiter link. You might find some good journalists on there, because they don't have any. I mean, actually, they have one. The one guy that did Jeff Wilser is a fantastic journalist. He works for them. I think he's like a freelance guy that does work for them. He did an article with DAI and I on ETHGate. He told us he would be unbiased, and he absolutely was. Shout out to Jeff Wilser, who's amazing. But CoinDesk could certainly use a few more people like Jeff Wilser in their reporting room, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. You're speaking of something that even Brad Garlinghouse himself had to come out and make a comment this morning or actually was it yesterday, about the article. It says, to put it mildly, it's embarrassing for CoinDesk. It's embarrassing for the industry, but as Kirk, it looks like Kulov or something like that, points out, these are the kinds of people, a deputy editor holding the whole industry back. Childish antics, masquerading under what should be a credible brand that leads coverage of the crypto industry. That was Brad's comment to that, to CoinDesk.
It's so spot on. And, you know, even when Brad is like probably pissed, he's still classy.
Very classy.
Very classy. I mean, you know, it's like, because they deserved 100 times that in response, and he kept it. He stayed classy, San Diego. Good for Brad. You know what I mean? And I'm quoting Ron Burgundy for anybody who wants to know.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, you know what? Look, it's been my experience that no matter what goes on here, how much they're attacked, it doesn't change. There's two different ways to come at this investor world in where I'm coming from.
Right.
There's the fundamental news, what's taking place every day, right? Proofs into partnerships, what kind of news, adoptions happening every day. There's your fundamental news. And then there's the technical analysis. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've always been drawn to the fundamental news, because to me, that's the news that ends up moving the needle on the chart at some point. So, I love it, first of all, and I love the technical analysts that are out here too, because I want to see the price move. But because I come from a fundamental investment side, and that's primarily where my channel comes from, and I do cover TA, and I'm grateful for the technical analysts. I'm not throwing shade. I think those people are amazing, and they have skills that I can't even dream of. But for me, I just gravitate towards. I'm drawn towards what they do today. You know, what that announcement was. You know, and then what could that mean, right? Like, let's talk about the stable coin for a second. You know, I had so many people send me messages, and it was almost the same question to the letter. You know, why are they putting a stable coin out if they got XRP? What does that mean for XRP? Does that mean it's gone? I know that they're scared, and I know everybody has concerns, and I know they're legitimate. So I don't want to be dismissive, and I don't want to sound dismissive. But, you know, I think sometimes people don't realize how big this is. This isn't about crypto. This is about the monetary system. This is about the petrodollar agreement that is going away. And this really is about that. There was the gold standard that was replaced by the petrodollar agreement. Now that's going away. Something has to underpin the US dollar to remain dominant for the next 150 years, or you and I will be shoving dollars in a wood stove to keep warm, because they're worthless unless you burn them. So I know that people in our life we haven't seen a moment like that in our country, but there's plenty of other countries that know this story. Right? Cyprus knows this story. Greece knows this story. Venezuela knows this story. Right? There's plenty of places around. Turkey knows this story. So, you know, but people think because we're so big a nation that it can't happen, James. But the reality is it's happening right now. And what is taking place, this is why I feel like people miss the ultimate thing here. Well, what do we need XRP for? Listen, when you're as Rahm Emanuel said back in the day, never let a good crisis go to waste.
That's right.
This is the moment of time to introduce a new money. And a lot of people go, yeah, Bitcoin's been here for 12 years. No. Bitcoin is on the outside of the financial system. And right now, Wall Street's buying it and pimping it out and making it its little you-know-what inside of their little world, and they're buying it all. And the fear is that once they get enough of it, they'll turn that open-ended fund, that ETF fund, to a closed fund, and then they buy all the Bitcoin that they just had their clients custody for them, and now it's theirs.
People don't realize that it's the chaos like this that just validates the need for XRP and what it actually offers. And to your other point, I think what happens, Brad, more often than not, when we don't get the answers, and I don't say me and you, but when people don't get the answers they're looking for, they just start coming up with all these different narratives without, you know, like when you're talking about the stable coin. And, you know, so why is that not the case with Binance? I mean, they got BNB that's shot through the roof, and they also got a BUSD. So, I mean, it's just, you know, people just want to come up with whatever narrative that makes them feel good. And a lot of times when you want things, you know, if you're looking for the negativity, you're going to come up with all these different variations of why things aren't going to work. And I think that's what it really comes down to. Now, that leads into my next question, which is, you know, obviously people get frustrated. They see, you know, Shikaka coin go from, you know, 15 zeros, maybe it moves and drops like 4 or 5. People have made millions, you know, they see the charts going crazy and they just don't get it. But what would you say, you know, and again, this is not financial advice, you know, I still see, obviously, you know, you may agree with this, that XRP for right now is going to continuously move with this market. Bitcoin goes up, it goes up, it goes down, it goes down. If we see $100,000 Bitcoin, or even going up somewhere near that, maybe in the 80, 90, maybe we start breaking that dollar real strong and getting up into where we need to get to. The problem is a lot of times when Bitcoin hiccups, XRP tends to go down a little hard, but so does a lot of other coins. I think what people don't realize is that it's because we haven't been embraced or adopted by institutional investors yet, and I think or companies. And I think what happens is that people don't realize. I think that's what Brad Garlinghouse was talking about when he talks about the flip of the switch. I think at that moment we separate ourselves from the rest of the market when it's really embraced and adopted by these institutions for what it was created for. Your opinion as far as what you see, just personally, in the short term and long term with XRP? Because you got some crazy numbers out there, man. I mean, you got Ripple itself, Joe Cass saying, look, for it to work the way it's supposed to, it should be at least 10,000 or more. You got Jimmy Valley and Molly Elmore's Vahill Capital said 25 to 35,000 by 2030. You've got some people like Dave XRP Line that's even giving you numbers way beyond that. Where do you see XRP in the short term and in the long term without, feeling like it's financial advice?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And, look, what I'll say is to build it off this point, the recent news about the stablecoin launch, think about what Tether's done for Bitcoin. Think about what USDC as an ERC20 token's done for the Ethereum network. Now think about what Ripple stablecoin is going to do for the XRP ledger. It's massive, right? And I'll give you this number too, real quick. Currently, it's a $150 billion stablecoin market right now. And now that's against knowing that it's a $2.6 to $2.8 trillion market cap for crypto. So 2.8 trillion market for cryptocurrency as a whole. And then we have 150 billion market total for stablecoins as a whole. Now, if we keep that same percentage, Brad Garlinghouse and Ripple said in 4 years, that 150 billion stablecoin market is going to be 2.8 trillion. The size of the cryptocurrency market in 4 years, which means if we make the adjustment for the cryptocurrency market, if the stablecoin market's 2.8 trillion, that means the cryptocurrency market is 40 to 60 trillion.
Wow.
If it's the same, if the same correlation.
Yeah.
So, this definitely comes down in my mind where it's always been. There's been a false narrative created in this space because I believe of the negative sentiment and people that have these pseudo timelines that it should have happened by. Right. And because it doesn't, then they get bitter and then they start creating these negative narratives.
Right.
And what I see is the biggest negative narrative is that there's not enough developers building on the XRP ledger. It's like, well, that is true. That's a fact. And it's true. But it's not because the tech isn't good enough or because Ripple's not doing a good enough job. Mm-hmm. It's because we need clarity. That's right. And there's still a piece of this case hanging over our head. What happened to the Ethereum network after they got a fake free pass from William Hinman? Man. It went like a hockey stick and jumped up. And they got developers and all kinds of, it was an assembly line for projects to be launched off of that because the developers believe this is the safest place to build.
That's it.
The same thing is about to happen for us, only it won't be a fake free pass.
That's right.
It'll be the legal pass that we should all have. Right?
That we earned. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, that to me is where it's coming. And I certainly believe that XRP can go 4 or 5 digits and beyond because it is designed to complement the financial system and not challenge it. And that's the big difference for me because look, I have exposure to Bitcoin. I have Bitcoin. You know what I mean? And so I got it. I got some, but it was also an anti-establishment, anti-government token. That's what it was created behind, a libertarian concept. Now, the libertarian to me loves it. Right. But the 52-year-old grown man understands that libertarianism works best when you're sleeping because it's a dream.
That's right.
Because the government ain't going for that shit. And the government, just like Bernard Bernanke, the former Fed chair, said years ago at a Ripple Swell conference, they'll wheel out the tanks before they let somebody else have their money be in control.
That's right.
So that ain't happening. And the truth is that if we're not careful, you got to lay a lot of weight towards the regulators, whether it is a Gary Gensler or whoever is going to be in that chair. You got to put a lot of weight there because at the end of the day, that's the hurdle we need to get over. Because when we get over that hurdle, now you're talking about legislation after that. And then we're really free to operate inside the financial system where we were intended to be. And that's where we'll see all the growth.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I want to ask you a hypothetical, if you don't mind. Yeah, let's say we were in XRP Las Vegas right now. And Brad was up on the stage and the audience is full of all these people in XRP, some that are super excited, some that are confused, some and the question that someone threw out to Brad is, why are so many people frustrated right now at XRP's price? How would you answer that?
I think a lot of people are frustrated because they've been in here a long time. And be truthful, I mean, you could say that they're impatient, but they've been waiting 7 years. But again, I come back to what makes it impatient? Just because you want to retire and put your work boots in the closet?
Right.
Or what makes it impatient? Have they done something to slow things down themselves? See, when we start to look at where the impatience is coming from,
right,
what measure are you using? I just want to be retired. So do I. I feel that frustration, but you have to, or you should. People should weigh what am I using for measure for this impatience that I happen to have, right?
Right.
Because they're going through all of the things the right way. They're transparent. They're taking on the SEC. They're doing all the things the right way. So for me, yeah, I think I just saw a comment. Liz Herrera, I think it is. Perfect comment. Perspective. You your digital perspective, right? So you have to come back to where is your perspective coming from? Where is this impatience coming from? And it's so important because if you look at it, I would tell people, what's the goal here? If you go back to World War II, when the pound was the world reserve currency, and the dollar was about to become the world reserve currency. Well, before that moment of transition took place, there was about a 14-year window that the United States was working very hard to make the dollar strong enough and to get enough gold behind it at the time to make it a viable option for that transition that was coming.
That's right.
To be selected. Because it was actually suggested that we use the Bancor coin by John Maynard Keynes at Bretton Woods. And then the argument went on over a few days and they convinced them to go with the US dollar instead because we had less debt and more gold at the time. So when you come back to that, because I believe that's why Ripple and XRP is here. Yep. It is here to become the next underpinning of the dominance of the US dollar for the next 150, 200 years. So if we understand that, this little 7-year wait or 5-year wait that people been in this space is kind of nothing to me.
That's right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, what a lot of people don't realize too is I always talk about the whole, Olympics, Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Harding hired this mugger to hit Nancy in the ankles that kept her from performing. People, a lot of times, I always use that because people don't realize the damage that the SEC has caused to Ripple. And there's a reason. Yeah, I mean, would we be seeing, I think if that hadn't happened, you probably have people that would be very pissed off and irritated at $2 and something cents, maybe $3 right now. And the difference between where we're at and that number is just because of what they've done. Now, I also feel like because of that, the spring is even tighter. And what I mean by that is that, when you hold something down this amazing and you see all these beneficial things they're doing, that spring, when it pops, I'm telling you, it's going to be absolutely incredible. And that's not financial advice, but that's just my opinion on that. When you look at the documentary that's being created right now, and I saw you on it with Chris and Molly, and XRP Unleashed, the ETHGate whole story that's being uncovered. They've had so many brilliant people. They had yourself, they had DAI, they had John Deaton, they had all these different people in the space, some of the most brilliant minds. What does that documentary mean? Will that go down in history as something that's going to be huge for the crypto space or digital assets from time to years to come? How important is that document?
I think that documentary is extremely important. And the reason I feel like the documentary is extremely important is because it exposes what I believe is a level of corruption that's bigger than what Enron was.
Wow.
And it's important for us to understand the depth of what really went on there because, this is our taxpayer money. These people sit in a public office and then choose winners and losers. I mean, it's exactly what happened that day when William Hemming gave that speech. He decided to give Ethereum a pass and overlook the thing that he's not overlooking for every other token in the space at the time. And you have to ask yourself, why did he do that?
That's right.
And I think we all know that William Hemmond had 15 million reasons why to do that. He was warned by the Inspector General inside of his own office that he could not receive that money, and he ignored it and took it anyway.
No, those are facts.
That's fact.
Wow, facts. So let me ask you this. Where do you see crypto in the next 5 years, and do the elections or the elections that we're facing right now, will that change it for the better or the worse in your opinion?
Well, it's kind of up in the air, isn't it? Right? Because we don't know where it's going or who's really going to be there. Right. I certainly believe, and I'm not a very political person, in fact, I have a bit of a motto when it comes to politics. Right. And I could share a great political story with you offline. It's too long to share on here, but it really proved everything I've known politics to be. But it's a rigged game. I'll say that in short. But what I'll say is that I certainly believe that there's other entities controlling the outcome of our elections to a great degree. And I'm not a supporter of any one person, right. But I personally believe I'd like to see a split ticket of, let's say, Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because it'd be a Democrat-Republican ticket. And then let's see the country vote on that ticket. And then let's find out what the results of that election is. Because I'm pretty sure you bring the whole country together with that kind of ticket. Yeah. Whether you like them or not, right? I think those two people could solidify this country again. And in doing so, I think you could also prove and dare the deep state to fool with the election booze, right? Yeah. Because the country's going to know if you put a split ticket together and they still don't win, that's a problem, right? Yeah. We got something bigger going on. And when it comes to politics, and again, I don't say that as an endorsement of either one. I say that as bring one from each party. I don't even care who's on the front seat or on the back seat. I don't give a damn. They could argue over that. I'm just saying bring one from each party, and then let's see what goes on there. Because the country ain't gonna go for that shit if it don't come out the way it's supposed to come out. Because it'll be obvious to the world, right, that something's happening above and beyond our free election. So when it comes to politics in general, I'm a person who does not get involved with politics unless it starts to cross and interfere with my pursuits, my goals, and my dreams in my life. Right. And if it interferes with that, I will get heavily involved, just like I'm heavily involved to make sure that I work very diligently to unseat Elizabeth Warren and to send her ass home. Right? That's right. That's right. That's right. Because that's happening. John Deaton is the next senator of Massachusetts. Wow. If I got anything to say about it, because I won't stop. There's nothing I won't do to really make sure, legitimately, there's nothing I won't do to help support John Deaton get into that seat, because I know that he's a real leader, and I know that he can educate the rest of Congress on what would take place and as far as crypto and the benefits of that innovation. So we absolutely need somebody like him there. Yeah, I agree with you. I want to talk about now one of the biggest, I'm going to call it digital asset events on the planet. XRP Las Vegas 2024. Well, number one is, I'm trying to figure out which way I want to go. Before I say how important it is, how did that get started? I know you told me, but how did you get started with that? And how many have you had? This is the second year, and I have the funniest story about how this happened. Okay. And this is incredible. So I had started a private group, right? And I was like, I want to do a meetup for the private group. And then we were all excited about it. So I asked a few people if they would attend, and they were like, yeah. And then I told my wife, I said, if I just add a couple more people to this thing, it's not a meetup anymore. It's a conference. That's right. And, and it's good to know too, because I know that I've inspired others. There was just recently a big meetup in Australia, and I know I inspired them. And I know most of them cats don't even care for me over there. But I tell you what, I don't even care. I'm glad they did it, because it's about getting the word out and spreading it. And that's all that matters, right? That you're engaging with people, you're educating people. And that's the biggest part about it. So last year was our first year. We had, I don't know, just under 500 people there that attended. It was unbelievable. We were so blown away. This year, I could tell you that we don't really give out the numbers of how many people are there. But what I can tell you is that we've already shattered that record.
Wow.
Shattered that record.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. We are setting a world record. This is the largest XRP Las Vegas conference in the world. And we're so grateful for all the people that have come out. I can't name all the sponsors, but the CEO of Uphold, the CEO of iTrust, the CEO of Link2, the CEO of Glint, the founder of Glint, right? You know what I mean? Perry Ann Boring and Cody Carbone from the Digital Chamber of Commerce, now rebranded as the Digital Chamber, right? We got a congressman coming, Wiley Nickel, who's a crypto advocate, moderate Democrat coming. We got David Schwartz on stage. Brad Garlinghouse showed up last year. It's like, this is just so beyond me. I'm so grateful because of everybody that realizes that what we're doing is for the community. This is not about me. You were going to see me on stage like once.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Last year I did the opening statement and the closing statement. And then we celebrated all the other YouTubers that were participating as moderators and stuff on stage. So this year we're going a little bit different with the shift. Our MC will be Will Petruski from Link2. Who's the head of sales there. He's remarkable. Shout out to Ray Fuentes, who's incredible. He'll be attending, but he was our MC last year. We love Ray. Right. But we still got Link2 tied in, right? So, and then we're going to have, I got something big coming. I can't even say what it is, but I tell you, if you haven't gone out and gotten that private ticket from the Digital Chamber to have dinner with Brad Garlinghouse, Michael Arrington, the Honorable Christian Carlo, John Deaton, and others, what in the world are you waiting for? I have met this guy and talked to him, and he is so down to earth and so cool. Obviously, you have to recognize that he's a very important man and he's very busy, right? But he is absolutely just like you and I. And if you just treat him cool and don't bum rush up on him real hard, you know, he'll be happy to talk to anybody that comes up to him, you know. So I encourage people to get that ticket because it'll be an experience you will never forget. And I also encourage people to come to the conference because this is a defining moment for XRP in the ledger, right? AMMs, stable coins, auto bridging, pathfinding. This is remarkable what's coming together right now.
You know, I got an old saying. It's SW next, which is some will, some won't. So what next? What I mean by that is, you know, I saw someone make a comment just a moment ago, and it wasn't a bad comment. It's just like after the stablecoin news, now I, you know, it helped my belief or whatever. And it's like, if you really want to know what you're a part of, come see where all the most brilliant minds in the space come to. If you really want to get an idea of what this is really about, and I know I was there last year. I was able to see that, and I actually got to meet and hang out. He actually was sitting there talking, and we spent probably about 15, 20 minutes, and we exchanged numbers. The CEO of Glint, great guy, and it's just it was definitely something that I would co-sign and recommend people attending. I was going to ask the question of why is it so important, and maybe I will still ask you that, like, why is it so important for a person? Either you've been in this space or you're just getting into the space. Is it for any of the reasons I said, or maybe some things I haven't said, just a validation of what you're a part of? Because people go ahead. No,
I think you made fantastic points. It's like when you look, we are social creatures as human beings, right? And if you think social media is incredible and interacting on social media, just you show up in person and start to meet those people in person and watch what happens. I can't tell you the amount of deals that were made at this conference last year because I got messages galore last year. And, you know, that's the real deal when you come and solidify that relationship in person, not to mention the fact that this truly is one of the most important times in the XRP Ledger's life and existence. We're about to go through the final stage of the case. We're about to see the launch this year at some point of stable coins on the XRP Ledger. We're possibly going to see stable coin legislation in the United States get passed this year. You know, so it's what a pivotal moment. It is not a mistake, James, that we have the co-founder of the Digital Dollar Project on stage with me as a fireside chat to discuss how we're going to make sure that the US dollar is dominant for the next 150 years. And you're not going to believe what we're going to talk about when it comes to that. Because we're going in. I've already approved that conversation with Chris Giancarlo, and it is going to be fire.
Awesome. Oh man, I love it. I can't wait to be there and get all the information. And that's one of the things too. I just think there's going to be a lot of valuable things that are going to be shared on that stage.
Yes.
Your thoughts on Swift and XRP from a political standpoint? What do you see? Swift, they're the dinosaur. Ripple, you think, is it a takeover? Is it work together? Where's your thought process on that?
This is so interesting, and what a great question, James. Well, I think it could go a couple ways, right? And it really probably is up to Swift, right? I'll give a quick story I've shared years ago on my channel, but my wife and I started a little beach company and invented a product for the beach several years ago. And for a hot second, it took right off. And then there was a whole thing that went down. It was really unique. What a learning experience. But it was in launching that company and teaching myself how to become a global importer, learning how to speak broken Mandarin so I could get the stuff done at the Chinese factories and sent through customs back to the US,
right?
That I learned about a company called Swift and having to send tens of thousands of dollars overseas to get my stuff made. So it was at that time when I was learning how to invest in all those things that I was also launching that company. And then I knew what a problem Swift was, because it would take 5 days to get my money to China. And I never knew where it was while it was in between that 5 days.
Jeez.
Then when it got to China, there was always a currency differential, and they would take your payment arrived, but now you owe an extra this because the currency differential that China pulled, right? So I knew firsthand that the problem Ripple was solving was real, because I was dealing with that problem every friggin' week. It was unbelievable. So that was the first alarm that went off. So when it comes to Swift, we know that there's Swift, we know there's Ripple, we know there's RippleNet. RippleNet, to me, is more like the infrastructure that could replace Swift, because it can do way more than Swift ever could. Now, the question comes down to me, how much market capture do they get? If Ripple starts capturing a lot of their customers from Swift directly, I would imagine Swift will look to do some kind of an integration partnership. But if they allow Ripple to get too many partnerships, they'll tell them things are going great over here. We'll just hang out and see how many more of your friends want to come hang out with us.
Okay.
And then the more that happens, the more you set yourself up for a larger play. Let me go back to that beach company I created. Within 28 days of me launching that company, I snatched 10% market capture of the largest beach supplier in the world.
Wow.
And within 29 days, that owner of that company, who was featured on Shark Tank, called my cell phone.
Wow.
You do not have to have 100% of the business to get the largest player's attention. I know that for a fact.
Wow.
Because it happened to me. So all they have to do is get a small market capture for that conversation to get absolutely real. And then it comes down, are we going to do a partnership? Are we going to do a merger acquisition? How are we going to do this? But I can guarantee you this, something's going to have to happen, because it's not sustainable the way Swift's operating right now in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree with you. How about your views on BRICS, Ripple, and the Bank of International Settlements? Any input on that?
Wow, this is so good. This is so good. So, well, BRICS is a coalition that is not down with the green agenda. That's what's going on there. All of those countries are natural resource, natural oil, gas, natural gas producing countries. And they're not feeling the green agenda. So they've started their own party. They got their own payment system built. And most of the major countries in BRICS are already partnered in some way, directly or indirectly, with Ripple, right? So this gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
XRP is a bridge currency. BRICS coalition talks about launching a gold-backed currency that could damage the dollar's dominance. But if XRP is a bridge currency, you ain't damaged nothing.
That's right.
Because if you could put something in between all the different currencies of the world, then what you do with your currency only affects your country.
That's right.
And your citizens. And that's the world we're moving to.
That's
and
right.
I can't wait to get there in scale, right?
That's right.
Because that's really where we need to be. And I'll say this about stable coins. This is why I talk about stable coins on my channel so often. It's so important that we get stable coin legislation. And people say, I know it's the on and off ramp to crypto. That's correct. But that ain't why it's so important. It's so important because stable coins are the digital money of the internet. It's how we move value digitally.
That's right.
And to take it a step further, if we're going to see any hyperinflated dollars come back home from a de-dollarization movement from BRICS and other countries that want to come off of the US dollar, it's going to cause hyperinflation here. Yeah. And if they pass the stablecoin legislation that allows private issuers to release their own stablecoins under regulation, like Ripple and other banks and institutions and financial institutions, to do all of these things, you've created a brand new use case for treasuries and US dollars.
Right.
And if it does go into hyperinflation to where it takes $2 to make $1 or $3 to make $1, then the banks and Ripple have to hold that 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio and provide us with an actual digital dollar on your phone.
That's right.
We don't have to hold all those paper dollars in our pocket. It's their job to create it. So stable coins are going to act as a sponge for this transition period that we're moving into of this new monetary system to soak up all these hyperinflated treasuries and dollars that are coming home. And I don't think a lot of people really realize how important that is going to be very soon.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm looking at a TK's comment here. Would Ripple announce to the world that they plan to issue their own stablecoin on the XRPL if they didn't know the outcome of the case? And when I look at that, Brad, I think, that makes me think of this, and that is, 10%, or the reason that I'm excited is because I understand what it was created for, but it's like, we only really have 10% of what the bigger play is. I mean, obviously, Ripple knows a lot more than we know. I think there's partnerships, but it makes me think about this word called this word faith. A lot of people, they talk about Bitcoin. Oh man, if I'd have got in at before $1, and chances are you'd have sold at 50, or you sold at 10, or you'd have never had it this long. It's the faith. Or you look at XRP, like you said, you saw it, less than a penny, and it's the faith of that. Or we could even go, I don't want to go too, spiritual, but it's like, okay, well, if you understood, if everyone saw, God walking around the planet, we probably have instant faith. But so that's a tough thing sometimes to have. But that's why it's so important for you to do your research, do your due diligence, dig into what this company represents, or you're just going to keep seeing things like the victory from Judge Annalisa Torres, or all of a sudden there's a stable coin. I mean, it's like, how much do you have to see? And that's why, in my opinion, Brad, I actually did this this little video here, and I want you to look at it. I show it. I don't show it all the time, but I do tend to show it. But I want you to take a look at this and let me know what your thought is in reference to, if I can pull it up here. We're going to be getting out of here in just a second, but what I said here, because I think a lot of people, in my opinion, Brad, are going to miss the boat. And see what you think after listening to the statement here that I made. I was doing an interview with Edo Farina. I'll let you listen to this real quick.
$10 XRP will change most people's lives. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I also agree it's going to probably be one of the biggest regrets that people made. Because again, if Allow Capital, who said a possibility of a $25,000 to $35,000 XRP by 2030, let's say they're 10% right. That's $2,500 to $3,500. Let's say they're 1% right. That's $250 to $350. Okay, screw them. Forget that. I mean, screw them, but forget that analogy. Let's go with Ripple itself. XRP, in order to work the way it has to globally, has to be at least $10,000. Okay, let's say they're 10% right. That's $1,000. Okay, let's say they're 1% right. That's $100. So my whole thing is, I think a lot of people are going to miss the 1% potential at $5 or $10, maybe $20. I think that's where people just have to have a solid plan, because I mean, $10 million isn't what it used to be back in the day. And again, that's not financial advice. I'm just saying people have to be smart. Everyone's going to have different levels. A $10 XRP changes a lot of people's lives. $100,000 changes a lot. So I'm not trying to dismiss that. All I'm saying is you should have levels of where you're cashing out. You have strategic levels of where you're cashing out, and I wouldn't go all out at a certain dollar. Again, that's not financial advice, but man, I don't know what's greater, to get $10 or to live with a life full of regretment if it potentially hits 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or anything else that they're saying. It'd be crazy. Between all of us here, the stocks of Pepto-Bismol are going to go up because you're going to have a lot of sick people that missed the boat. $10.
So that part right there. So, your thought on, hearing something like that, as far as most people will probably miss the boat because, as soon as it gets to, $5 or $10, they lost the faith and they don't see the bigger picture long term.
Well, James, I just think it's such a brilliant take on what has been discussed out here. And again, it's not financial advice, right? But I know that, and you even leaned into this in your comment, I call it shallow bag and long-term bag.
Right.
I've got an early bag that I could take for me and my wife, at an early stages. But again, to the point you were making, I do believe that it can go 4 or 5 digits. And I have part of my portfolio that is set aside for that to happen.
That's right.
But I do have, obviously, because I've been in the space a long time. So I've mentally prepared and taken a strategy and discipline to build a early bag that I could choose to take this whenever I wanted to take it, $5, $10 or whatever, but it doesn't take and hurt or harm me because I truly do believe that it going to 4 or 5 digits. Listen, I believe XRP is the bridge currency for the world. I believe it'll serve the world in a better capacity than the bank or coin, which was offered as a solution before the dollar was chosen in 1944 at Bretton Woods. And I firmly believe, as a long-term macro investor, this is what it's about. This is the moment. This is what Ripple and XRP are doing here, and Stellar too, for that matter, and XLM.
That's right.
But that's my personal perspective, right? That's and again, I like the way you preface all this stuff. I don't like to impose that on my will on others. I don't want to do that. But I do think a lot of people will be very sick. But that's not to say. I know it's a very personal choice. You know what I mean? And I know it's a very personal choice. And some people are not going to be in a position, right, where they're like, look, I have no choice. I've got to take this at $10 and I got to take the whole thing and do what I can do, right? But just don't go buy jet skis. You know what I mean? Go get something, do something with the money that's going to give you an ROI, right? Get yourself in an uncorrelated asset class. Go get hard assets, whether it be gold or some kind of property that's going to give you a return. Do something with the money that's further to invest it and keep it working for you. I mean, the biggest part of all of this is getting the money to work for us instead of us working for the money. That's the biggest flip the script moment right there.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Someone put a comment in. It looks like XRP Magnificent said, have you guys ever thought about maybe after the event, sometime down the line, where people who missed it can see a documentary or all the exciting news, or like a video or something of the event? Have you guys done that, or you ever thought about that?
Well, that's a great idea. Last year we did, and maybe I don't know if they're thinking of it in this way, but thanks for the comment, XRP Magnificent. But yeah, last year we did a web ticket, and people could, because there's a lot of people overseas that wanted to come and they just weren't able to. Right. Some of them were still under restrictions because of the pandemic and issues like that, depending on where they live. And only thing I say there is that, we're considering doing that this year, but our big hurdle, and this is where we're at right now, James. This is the truth. Our big hurdle right now is trying to negotiate, because there's activities going on, obviously not just our event, there's tons of other events happening at MGM too, right, that we're pushing to get more space because we don't want to have to shut the ticket sales off.
That makes sense.
That's why I've been telling people, like, get your tickets, because I could get a message. I've had 2 meetings now about getting more space. They haven't shut me down yet on ticket sales, but if they tell me that I don't get any more space, I got to cut tickets off.
Oh, wow.
And I don't have a choice about it, because this happened last year. We sold out, and I don't want to see that happen. That's why I'm telling people, get your tickets now, because whatever I sell, MGM's got to honor that and give us the space.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm trying to get as many sold. So if they come back and say we can't, I'll be like, well, this is our number. So you got to give us a number.
Exactly.
So that's why I'm really telling people, make sure you definitely get your ticket for that, because we could get the call tomorrow and says, we can't get you the extra space. So you can't keep selling tickets.
Wow. Yeah, it's very important. Now, let me ask you this. When a person, I know last year we got a ticket and you had different things. They had like lunch there. They had all the different things.
Yes.
What can a person who buys that ticket expect when they walk in that door? What are they experiencing for that price, if you don't mind?
100%. Yeah, it's a 2-day ticket. All tickets are 2-day tickets, except for the after party is a 1-day event, right? And that's on Saturday after the conference is over. And by the way, that after party is going to be one of the. It's already bigger than any XRP conference that's ever existed. That after party alone, right?
Wow.
So you're gonna want to come to that after party. And there are some very, very special people that are going to be at the after party.
Now, what day and time is that?
That'll be Saturday after the conference ends. I think it goes 6 to 9.
Love it. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. And then, so that a 2-day event, what you're going to get there, and you're going to get Friday, full day conference. There will be refreshments all day, right? And then there will be a lunch served, right?
Nice.
And then we'll finish. It'll run about 9 to 5, 9 to 4, something like that, about that time frame. Depending on the panels, we have a little flexibility, right, with how they run long or short. And then Friday night after that full day, and you will get, it's an immersive experience. So you will get to be directly involved with some of the companies that are there face to face.
Wow.
You're going to get to be directly involved with some of those companies. So, after that first day, there is the private dinner with Brad Garlinghouse, Michael Arrington, Honorable Chris Giancarlo, John Deaton, myself. DAI is going to be there. Eleanor Terrett from Fox is going to be there. It's going to be a remarkable event. And there may be something very special happening there, too, that I wish I could say today, but I can't. And I'm happy to come back on your show and say it when I can actually say it.
Man, anytime.
But I will say that that's the rest of that day for Friday. So a full day Friday. Then Saturday is going to be a huge day. We start a little earlier with the because we open the doors at the same time on Friday. But the panels start, I think, at around 10 a.m. because I want people to have time to mix and mingle a little bit before the day starts, because it'll be a long, solid day once it gets going. And then Friday or Saturday, we're going to start early in the morning. As soon as the doors open, a few minutes later, everything starts on stage.
Nice.
And that's going to be just, forget about it. Saturday is just a massive day of, now I did structure some breaks in there. So it'll be a panel. Then you get about a half-hour break, go get something to eat, go to the bathroom, catch up with people, go see somebody. There'll be a few breakout rooms where there's some events will be happening, I'm sure, as well, right? So look out for those. And then after Saturday's event, we had the pool party outside at MGM on the property. You will need a ticket for that, and it will be worth it. There'll be a lunch served on Saturday, refreshments all day at the thing. The VIP ticket, which is sold out, that's gone. That's been gone for weeks now.
Wow.
That's a whole experience in itself. The VIP ticket was the ticket to get. That's not only will you have VIP seating at the front of the stage, but there's a private VIP lounge.
Oh, wow.
There'll be different food and drinks in there. And you'll also be able to sit at the round tables, cocktail tables. You'll have a jumbo screen. So if you want to watch the panels on the conference and the fireside chats without going all the way up to the stage, you can sit right in there if you're in the middle of eating and not miss a thing.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So it's going to be a remarkable experience. And we just can't wait, man. We're so super excited to do this because, again, this is about bringing as much value to the people as we possibly can.
Absolutely. And no, I'm looking forward to being there. It sounds absolutely incredible. And again, I was there last year, so I'm looking forward to, and Crypto Navigator said just a month away. So looking forward to that in a major way. Your thoughts as we wrap up, I know we're over an hour now, but your thoughts on CBDCs, good or bad, or both?
Bad. Okay. Here's where I'm at with CBDCs. If you want a wholesale CBDC on the back end for central banks to put back and forth with, knock yourself out.
Right.
You want to send a CBDC to me directly from the Fed or the Treasury, you can go fly a kite with that because I don't want anything to do with it. And if you want to issue it through a private sector, you better make sure that it's held to a constitutional standard with the rights of privacy built into it. Because if it doesn't have the rights of privacy and the constitutional standards that all citizens really deserve, then I'm not interested, because I think Chris Giancarlo's got that right. If you design the digital dollar properly, it will remain dominant throughout the world.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is going to be the last question. I had a couple more after, but it's blockchain, is SEC. I'm kind of tired of talking about the SEC, but one thing I want to bring up about the SEC is this: the $2 billion ridiculous price. Is that something to just kill hope, to make this thing go out even further, or is that kind of like the final stage of the great settlement, whatever that was going to be? Is that like that? Does that tell us that because they're asking for something before they weren't asking for anything, the fact that they're asking for something, does that mean, hey, we're almost there? Your perspective on that? Your digital perspective.
What a great question, the way you posed that, James. So I love the way you just pitched that. That was really nice. So
thank you.
Because they're asking for a number, if you paid the $2 billion, it's over. That's the way that's going.
It's done. Yeah,
it's done. But we all know Ripple got it together. They ain't paying $2 billion, baby.
No,
that
no,
ain't happening.
no,
You know, that dog
no,
don't hunt,
no.
right? No criminal charges, no fraud, no illegal activity whatsoever. You know, so again, it's like when it's like when somebody gets in trouble and the state puts 15 charges against you when you actually only did 2 things.
That's right.
Now you're gonna beat off those 40 charges, but those last 2 sticking.
They're gonna get you for something. They want you. Yeah.
You're gonna put something on your ass. You're gonna be paying a fine, or you going away from home, or whatever the hell it is.
That's right.
So I look at that the same way.
Yeah.
From a street kind of point of view, that's where I come from. So, I look at that as the same thing. Like, when we ask for $2 billion, we're guaranteed to get at least 100 million. We were always talking about that big number, that 700 something million in Promatic sales, whatever it was. So if you want something close to that, you go crazy for $2 billion. You don't go saying, well, we want 700 million, because now you might only get 50. Exactly. Right. I got you. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. That's it. You make the number big as hell. So that way, whatever they reduce it to, it was bigger than the low number you would have started at.
That's right.
That's exactly how I see this. And what a shame. What a sad commentary that is. That our government tax dollars are allowing these politically appointed officials to come out here and to use their power in office to run a pay-to-play operation that we're casually discussing as just how it goes.
Yeah.
What a sad commentary it is.
Yeah. It's someone asked a question, do you need a separate ticket for the Saturday pool party?
Yes. World Be Free. You do. Yes, you do. Okay. And that's a great question. I'm glad you asked, but yes.
Yeah. It's sad because I think, like I said, I felt, even though he's a billionaire, my heart felt for Elon when I heard him make that statement, like, in order for me to save my baby. And I can only imagine what Brad and Chris Larson, all those guys are feeling like, in order to, save, their baby, if you will, and continue this push forward. They have to, like Molly said, pay the mob. It's just sad the way it is, but it is what it is. So
it is what it is. And another sad commentary that you could choose to, they made a conscious choice to publicly smear Ripple's name and Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson's name for 3 years in a row now.
Yeah.
To smear their reputation and their good name. Yeah. That's despicable.
Yeah.
That's despicable. And I personally know what that's like, because I've had people lie on me in this space and come up with lies that have been perpetuated for 5 years.
Right.
And they still do it. So I know on a level what that's like to have that done to you. And the people that do that are soulless human beings to do that to other people. Yeah,
I agree with you. Last thought, Brad, is this, and I appreciate you taking your time being here. I know you got so many other things you could be doing. America, it's sometimes over the last, I don't know how many years, I'm not saying I'm not proud, but it's hard to kind of make that statement that you're proud to be an American, even though, we embrace our country, we love our country. It just doesn't seem like sometimes our country loves us back. And when you're dealing with digital assets or cryptocurrency, a lot of times, I always say it's a representation of something that allows people to dream again. So many of us, when we were young, we dreamt about this. You, a musician, some people weren't able to live out those dreams. Maybe they had a child, maybe they had a circumstance, whatever it is. And crypto is, to me, the very definition of dreaming again. But unfortunately, it seems like we're in in a country that cares more about their agenda, and keeping people in this matrix where, you do just enough not to get fired. They pay you just enough not to quit, so you can retire on just enough what barely got you by in a percentage of what barely got you by in the first place. It's just a horrific matrix. And I like to, I don't talk about racism. I think just as Americans, it's a slave driven system. Your thoughts on that before we get out of here?
Yeah, no, it is. It's we're all slaves to capitalism and the society that's been built where you got to work for your dollars, right? And all of this business. It really is that. And listen, look, this isn't a beat up America thing.
No,
America's a flawed country, buddy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
America's participated in some dark shit.
That's right.
Right. Look, but the reality is, I don't say that in a negative way. I say it as in an embracing way.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not a perfect human. I don't get up every day and never have to apologize to somebody that I love or care about too. Look, what I'm saying is, look, I'm part Native American Indian, so I'm part Cherokee Indian, right? And there's an old adage, and I'll probably mess it up because I'm trying to just throw it off the cuff. But we don't inherit this land from our ancestors. We're borrowing it from our grandchildren, is the way it's said.
That's right.
And that's really the truth. And if you take on that responsibility and that mindset, then it is our America. This flawed country that has black eyes, right? That has done things, right? Through its government and its power to take land, to control people, right? And to still do it today, but in a more perverse way where you don't really recognize it the way we did back in the day, right?
That's right. That's right.
It all is there. But that's why I'm not a Republican. That's why I'm not a Democrat. I am an American patriot.
That's right.
And
that's right.
I am somebody who embraces this flawed nation as I embrace this flawed human.
That's
and
right.
I choose to love this place and to love my neighbor.
That's right.
To show them that I don't watch news on my television in my home for the last 15 years of my life. Because they don't divide me anymore. They have no access to me.
That's right.
Right? And who has access to me? My neighbor. You want to know how this country is? Talk to your neighbor, man.
That's right. That's right.
Talk to the people you're around every day. But if you talk to somebody who is diseased and filled with a 24-hour news cycle, you're not even talking to somebody who's connected to you in real time because they're too busy trying to spit out what they've been soaking up every 24-hour news cycle and trying to spit that back out like that's the new narrative.
That's right.
In large part, people don't care who's shitting in what bathroom.
Yeah.
Or what you do with your Johnny, whether you sew it on your ear or throw it in the trash. The reality is all of those things were created to be divisive. They were created because the people who really run this world are the Black Rocks and the Vanguards and the State Streets. Those are the ones that own a little piece of everything that we use, right? So the reality is those entities that really run this world, no matter who's in office, because they always win.
That's right.
So they're the ones running shit if they always win, right? So at the end of the day, they've never needed more than 3 tools. That's race warfare, gender warfare, and class warfare. And those are the 3 tools they've had in their toolbox from the very beginning. They've never needed another one. And any time that there's a problem that's dividing us as a people, it's either race warfare, class warfare, or gender warfare. You check it and see if I'm wrong.
Wow.
And if you turn your TV off, you'll get back down to understanding that that's just the shit they're trying to soak on us every day so we don't be friends.
That's right.
But we are, right? Man. And I'm not going to let them get in between me. And in fact, there's only 2 kinds of people in this world, and it's the haves and the have-nots. And for the first part of my life, I've been a have-not, but no more. My friend. And I'm helping as many people out here like you are every single day so we can become haves. And when you get there, you have a responsibility and an obligation to help somebody else learn how to do it too.
Man, it's like my sister Liz Herrera says, one of the biggest supporters of our channel. He just dropped a mic, spitting fire, spitting bars. Guys, I want you guys to do me a favor. Go on in the words of my brother Brad KIMES, digital perspective. Support this brother and all that he's doing to really drive this amazing industry forward. Brad, your final thoughts and words to all that are watching from the Digital Perspective family, the Crypto4Life family, and all those in the cryptocurrency industry. Your final words, sir.
Well, look, it's a pleasure, a privilege, and an honor to be here with you, James. And I want to thank you for the opportunity. And what I can say is that I've spent enough time with you already over the past few days. We've had time to really sit down and get to know each other, that we could use a few more James McFaddens in this space.
Thank you,
to
sir.
squash out the negativity and all the bad apples and the trolls out here that are trying to control everybody's thoughts and what they're allowed to talk about and not talk about. We've just had a beautiful conversation on here. And, you know, there's things, you know, that we've talked and tackled that weren't even crypto related, right? But we have the openness to be able to just have that dialogue. And that's the thing that's most important, because people think about freedom of speech and they think about, you know, saying certain things, but freedom of speech is really about us being to openly discuss things that we've done today. Right. And I don't take it for granted, man. And I thank you for having me on your show, James. I'm super excited for you.
Man, integrity, humble, first class all the way. Brad KIMES, Digital Perspective, brother. It's been an honor, a pleasure. Thank you so much for blessing us with your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, man. You're amazing, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you in a major way.
You.
Guys, my man, my brother, Brad KIMES. We'll talk to you guys soon. It's your boy James, aka 6AJ. And until next time, peace.